Recovering from Trump Derangement Syndrome, or TDS. It's the subject of this episode of the What's Wrong with America podcast. I'm your host, Daniel D. In addition to this podcast, I also do the Crazy Comedy, Humor, and Satire podcast. And I apologize, last week the sound quality was terrible. I kind of had some technical difficulties, so hopefully it sounds better this time around. It is Sunday, February 13th, 2022. This episode is brought to you by my book, Super Hashtag SJW Man, a cancel culture superhero, which is on sale this week on Amazon for 99 cents in the USA or 99 pence in the UK. If you hate the super woke, but you like to laugh at their absurdities, well, this is the book for you. I'll include a link in the show notes. It'll be an affiliate link for Amazon, so of course if you buy the book or if you buy something else, if you're just doing your regular shopping on Amazon, you click this link, then Amazon will kick a small portion of the sales price back to me at no additional cost to you. So there's that. All right. Recovering from Trump Derangement Syndrome. One of the things, and as I was preparing to do this episode, what's the latest story? More news showing that Hillary Clinton, or her campaign, basically invented the whole Russiagate hoax. Like, there was no basis in fact in that. I mean, the whole Steele dossier was a fraud. You know, that's been out now for a few weeks. That, it was all cooked up. No real evidence for any of it. Now they're saying that Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign paid an internet company to infiltrate servers at Trump Tower and the White House in order to link Donald Trump to Russia. That's a filing from a DOJ prosecutor tasked with investigating the origins of the whole FBI's Russia collusion probe. So, it's like every time you turn around, there's some something new comes to light showing that all this stuff that you thought you knew about Trump, and there are a lot of people on the right or Republican side. I mean, some of them legitimately skeptical of this. Some people they're listening to a different echo chamber. Maybe instead of CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, they get their news from like Fox News and whatever else, right? And so it's like they just kind of happen to be on the right side. I don't know, but for a lot of people, who back in 2016 still thought, and I was one of those, I still thought the Atlantic, the New York Times, the Washington Post, I thought those were legitimate news outlets. I knew they had their slant. I knew there was like a certain perspective the editorial pages would tend to have, so I'd kind of balance it out a little bit. I'd also read like National Review and Wall Street Journal and stuff like that. But, at the time I thought these media outlets are basically trustworthy, right? Like they may tell me, they may have an opinion on it, which is biased, but they're not going to just make up the facts, It's like that saying, now I'm trying to remember who said this. I think it was Daniel Patrick Moynihan said that every man is entitled to his own opinion, but nobody's entitled to his own facts. And I probably butchered that quote. But basically, it's like, that's what I thought was going on with the mainstream media is that, okay, they're giving me this stuff about Trump. They don't like him for the most part. The editorial page is clearly like has a left-leaning bias. But they're not just making up their own facts, right? Well, it turns out they were. It turns out that the Hillary Clinton campaign, the Democratic Party establishment, has routinely made up its own facts to further its narrative. And the corporate media just runs with it. They don't question it. Anything Trump would say would be immediately met with skepticism and derision. Like when Trump was talking about the vaccines, like we're going to roll out these vaccines. And, the corporate media was like, oh, this is going to be unsafe. I'm not taking a Trump vaccine, something rushed to market and it's not safe and blah, blah, blah. And even our good old vice president, Kamala Harris, said she wasn't going to take a Trump vaccine, right? Then all of a sudden, the election happens. Old geriatric Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, get elected, and all of a sudden the science changes, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, these vaccines are safe now. Thankfully, what happened? It's the same vaccine that's been in development for the past months under Trump, but now we got a Team Blue president, so now the vaccines are safe, and we're gonna mandate it, and you better shut up and not object to these mandates, or the loss of your freedom, or we're gonna banish you from society. We won't allow you to speak. We won't allow you to have a voice on a platform and on the internet, But anyway, so there's, with the left, right? Make up shit, promote it. So here's the thing with Trump and Trump Derangement Syndrome. 2016, all right, Trump is not a difficult person at that point in time to really kind of dismiss. He had been kind of a ridiculous figure. I mean, now you know him as President Trump, right? And all the stuff that went with that, the Trump administration. And but before that, before he even won the nomination for the Republican Party, you pretty much knew him as host of The Apprentice on NBC, right? So he's this reality TV star whose most famous thing is like this phrase, "You're fired," like dogging people out, firing them or whatever, right? So there's that. There's also the tabloid stuff. Like, he's been in the tabloids for many years now for his dramatic relationship with Ivanka Trump and his dalliances with different beautiful women and all that. He's just kind of a playboy, right? So it's like, it doesn't seem like too serious of a person, and then he's talking about running for president. You're like, yeah, whatever. And so when CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, The Atlantic come along and say Trump is this bad person, he doesn't really believe in anything except himself, he's a narcissist, he's this, he's that, he's a threat to democracy, he's not competent, he's not ready for the responsibilities of president. You're like, it's easy to believe. It's easy to accept that because you kind of are used to him already, and some of this is like his own doing. I mean, he kind of got famous for being famous back before that was a thing, back before like the Kardashians and whoever else. I mean, Trump was the original, guy who's like famous for being famous or famous for being infamous. This creature of the tabloids and the negative press and all that sort of stuff, right? So it's kind of like an easy thing to believe, and then too, the fact that there's such like hyper partisanship in the media, right? On the one hand, you have some of your more conservative media outlets, Fox News, obviously. You could say like Daily Wire, InfoWars, maybe they're kind of further to the right, the alt-right, as people like to say. Which I don't even know what that term means, alt-right. It's like you're not quite right, but you're like an alternative to being on the right. So you're an alternative to a right-winger? I don't know. But it's supposed to be really bad. It's supposed to mean you're a white supremacist. Whatever. Everything's white supremacy these days. But yeah, so you have those media outlets, and then you have on the left, they had all the mainstream media. So it's like, I would sometimes tune into Fox News at that point in time. I didn't really watch Alex Jones or pay attention to InfoWars or really the Daily Wire. I mean, I can't remember. I think I listened to Ben Shapiro's podcast occasionally at that point in time. But for the most part, I'm listening to Sam Harris, who, I don't know, Sam Harris. He's kind of got, he's still got Trump Derangement Syndrome, it seems like. And I like Sam Harris, and I just think he kind of got blindsided by some of the, the Trump Derangement Syndrome and some of these media sources that he relies on, which like I did too. I got blindsided by it. I thought, again, because I'm reading in the Atlantic all this stuff about alleging all these things that Trump is supposedly going to do or supposedly is doing, all these reasons why he's incompetent, right? And then there's the allegations of the Russia collusion, and at the time, I remember again thinking like, wow, how far have we fallen as a society? Imagine if, there was allegations. I mean, however bad you might think President Obama was, or President George W. Bush was, or whoever, right? It's like there was never any credible allegations promoted throughout the media, like actual, not like tabloids, but real media, this is what I thought at the time, alleging that they might be working with a foreign dictator to undermine the American interest, and this foreign dictator was actually helping to get them elected. Because that's what the allegation was, right? And you're reading this at the time in the New York Times, right? All the news that's fit to print. You're reading this in the Washington Post. Democracy dies in darkness. The same newspaper that brought you Woodward and Bernstein, All the President's Men, right? All these Pulitzer Prizes with the New York Times and the Washington Post. And you think, this is crazy. This guy is like linked somehow. Even the fact that there's this speculation, serious speculation by the FBI and whoever else that he might be this Russian asset. I'm like, this is terrible, right? I just believed it, And then it's like, as the years go on, and one thing after another, you realize, oh, that wasn't true, right? The whole Russiagate hoax. I mean, that turned out to be a complete fucking fraud. The Steele dossier and everything originated from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Like, that's what has come out. That every single fucking thing you thought you knew about Trump and Russia, if you were a reader of the New York Times, Washington Post, The Atlantic, or, back in 2016, 2017, all the stuff that you heard about Trump and Russia, every single thing, full stop, everything had its origin in the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC. Everything. There's not anything in there that was like the result of independent journalists investigating, tracking down leads and finding a deep throat source, within the Trump administration to give them the real information, No, I mean, it's like everything was fabricated by the Hillary Clinton campaign. 100%. But then came, and this was where, for me, the spell started to crack a little bit. The COVID stuff, because when that first hit, because the first thing you heard was like the stories from China. And it seemed like, oh, this is dreadful. There's this new disease. It's really rampant. It's a lot of people are dying. Chinese are having to build these emergency hospitals just for COVID patients. There's thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe dying. I mean, it's just like, that's the story you're getting. It sounds like a big freaking deal, right? And so, interestingly though, and I kind of wondered about this at first, because Trump, at that point, I still wasn't a fan of his. So one of the things that he announced was like banning or restricting international travel, like especially from China. And I thought, when I heard that, I was like, well, that's a good idea. But immediately, the mainstream corporate media, they're like, oh, this is terrible, blaming the Chinese, restricting travel from China. And I'm like, well, why would that be a bad thing? Like, if there's this communicable disease, it's nothing against the Chinese. Now, granted, they did kind of manufacture the virus. I didn't know that at the time, but, but yeah, if you have, forget about COVID. Let's just say there's another Ebola outbreak, right? And it's like huge outbreak of Ebola in, pick your country, right? Nigeria. Let's just say Nigeria has this huge Ebola outbreak. And there's calls to like, hey, we got to restrict travel from Nigeria. Well, yeah, it doesn't mean you're racist against Nigerians. It just means you don't want to get Ebola. You don't want it coming here. You don't want it spread here. So you're going to like restrict travel from those places where Ebola is actively spreading, right? Makes a lot of sense. But the left and the media was like, oh, this is terrible. He's, anti-Asian bigotry. He's being racist. I'm like, no, he's not, So that was the first thing where I was kind of like, oh, wait a minute, guys. Because then it's like, you see Nancy Pelosi going to Chinatown in San Francisco, like, see, without a mask or anything like that, right? Interestingly enough, the very same people who brought you lockdowns and really pushed the hardest for lockdowns and mandates are the same people that early on, when Trump was like, let's restrict travel from China, where this pandemic is really happening right now. No, that's racist. That's terrible. But as time goes on with this coronavirus, I mean, more and more lies come to light. And I saw a meme, actually. I thought it was really good on Twitter. Yeah, every now and again on Twitter, you can actually see stuff that's worthwhile. Most of it's shit. But every now and again, you see something on Twitter that's pretty good. So this particular one, it said like, Trump did not drain the swamp. However, Trump did not completely drain the swamp, I should say. However, he drained it enough that we can see the corrupt swamp creatures for what they are, which I think that's true. I think, whether it was his presence in the White House or just whatever, like, he provoked such a strong reaction from the left, from the woke left, from the regime media. And yeah, I know Trump was the president, but this deep state thing is real. You see the way the FBI mobilized against him. The federal law enforcement and intelligence services actively worked against the sitting president. When the social media companies collectively banned Trump from their platforms, the sitting president can't be on our platform, can't share his opinions, but we're going to make sure we keep Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un or whatever Kim Jong there is over in North Korea. We'll keep him on. The head of the Taliban, yes. The head of ISIS, yes. We got to allow them to spread their news. But damn it, we got to be tolerant, and we can't allow a bigot like Donald Trump on our platform. Anyway, so yeah, with Trump, there was that whole thing with him restricting travel from China to slow the spread of the pandemic, something that you should be for if you think this is a big deal, right? But no, that was racist. But then, comes the stuff with the lockdowns, right? And there's the whole thing with don't protest the lockdowns, right? Because some people on the right were protesting the lockdowns, right? Because it's having this horrible impact on their businesses. They're like, we got to open the businesses up. We shouldn't be locked down. And, what happens? The mainstream media, the left, the public health officials, Darth Fauci, we're saying, oh, this is irresponsible. This is going to spread disease. This is going to cause people to die because, this virus is so dangerous and deadly. You can't gather together to protest. You're not socially distancing. You're not masked up. You're gathering together to protest these lockdowns. That's irresponsible because it's going to lead to people dying. It's going to cause this disease to spread, right? That was the message. Then George Floyd gets killed. And I'm not saying people shouldn't have protested for George Floyd because what happened to him was horrific, no matter what kind of a criminal piece of shit he had been previously in his life, which appears that he was, based on his rap sheet. He didn't deserve to, be killed by Derek Chauvin, right? So I understand people protesting because that tape was sick. The video footage of George Floyd getting killed was terrible. But what about the public health officials and the mainstream media, the same people who had just gotten through saying you should not protest against the lockdowns, against the mandates, right? Well, we didn't have vax mandates at that time, but it was mask mandates, right? People were protesting. It was like, oh, you shouldn't protest against these things because you're going to spread the virus. People are going to die. Lots of people are going to die because you're protesting. Then people get together to protest for Black Lives Matter, and these same public health officials, oh, well, it's actually a good thing for them to protest because it's, they're not going to spread disease. This is a low-risk situation. Yeah, you got a lot of people not socially distancing, many of them not wearing masks, gathering together in dense urban centers to protest and riot, But that's not a problem. And in fact, public health officials, some of them actually said they were going to participate in these protests, right? Some of the same people that said just weeks earlier, oh, this is terribly dangerous for people to protest, it was even so bad that it's like you couldn't go to your mom's funeral. If your mom, Lord forbid, passed away of COVID, right? You couldn't be there. Or even if she didn't pass away of COVID, even if she passed away of something else, right? In many states, it's like, nope, you can't go to the hospital. You can't be at her bedside while she's dying. You can't go to her funeral afterward. New York mayor at the time, Bill de Blasio, used the NYPD to shut down funerals. These Orthodox Jews out there, flouting the pandemic, having funerals, gathering together to mourn the loss of their loved ones, spreading this pandemic, killing people, right? And then BLM protests, and Bill de Blasio's all for that. Hell, his daughter goes and joins in the protest, right? The / riots. You know? He has BLM painted all over the street in front of Trump Tower, right? Yeah, you know? Because the virus, right? It's so dangerous and deadly. It'll kill you if you go to your mom's funeral. But if you go to protest for George Floyd, well, the virus knows what's going on. It's not going to infect you because it's woke. It was engineered in the lab by the Chinese with funding from our own government, Dr. Darth Fauci, you know? So anyway, there's that. There's these cases like Jacob Blake or Kyle Rittenhouse or what, take your pick, you know, where you see if you don't just stick with CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, you know, if you actually like consider, you know, independent journalists, independent media, you know, whether you're talking about InfoWars, the Daily Wire, or whoever, right? The Blaze. It's like you go to their website and you see the video that they didn't show you on CNN or in the New York Times, you know, the footage and facts that they didn't share with you on those mainstream legacy media outlets, you know, and you're like, oh, what actually happened is very different than the story that's being promoted in the media. So that's another thing, you know, with and the depictions, like if Trump's critical of the rioting, the media is just quick to jump on Trump as being the bad guy, the fascist, the authoritarian. And here's another lie that they had. Trump, for his photo op at this church, you know, had the Secret Service or the Capitol Police clear out peaceful protests so that he can get a photo op. Turned out to be completely false. They didn't stop the Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, all that from running with the story and then not really bothering to issue a retraction or a correction, you know, after it was turned out to be false. I mean, it was just one thing after another. So finally, summer of 2020 was really what did it for me. As seeing more and more of these lies of the mainstream media exposed in real time and seeing that, oh yeah, these guys, it's not just that they have a difference of opinion. They are inventing their own facts. You know, I can deal with, and in fact, I would even like, you know, reading different media sources that have different perspectives. You know, that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to like go to different people who see the world differently, have different experiences or takes on things, and they're like, here's what I think about this, here's what I think about it, you know, and then you can kind of see like, okay, that can kind of help you. Maybe I hadn't thought of this before. Maybe this is an angle that I haven't considered before, right? But when it's like you have different media sources and they're like just inventing the narrative, we're like, well, you don't need to hear these facts because those don't really support the message that we're trying to convey. Our opinion is what matters, not the facts. So we're just going to give you a few of the facts. We're going to take them out of context. And we'll even give you some facts that were made up by somebody, but somebody who's got a lot of street cred, somebody who's got a blue check mark next to their name on Twitter. So we're going to give you these facts. And if they turn out to be false, we won't let you know. You know. So the media to me is like they completely lost their credibility. 2020, I was like, I canceled my subscription to the New York Times, canceled my subscription to the Washington Post. I didn't cancel my subscription to the Atlantic. I probably should have, but sometimes the Atlantic has some good stuff. And it was like $26 for a year for print and digital access. So I was like, all right, whatever. I'll stick with that. I'll keep one lying mainstream media source. But the rest of them, I was like, no, I canceled all that shit. Because, you know, to me, it's like, you know, if you go to a used car lot, you're looking for a car, and the salesman tells you, oh, this is a great car. It's got a V8 engine. It's only got 50,000 miles on it. You know, it gives you all this stuff. And you find out one thing after another that he told you just ain't true. And in fact, it's like not even slightly off. It's completely off. Like it's the opposite, right? He said, oh, this is a great car. Low mileage. It's only got 50,000 miles. And then you look at it, it's like, oh, it actually has, you know, 150,000 miles. Or, you know, in the salesman is like, oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one. You know, I just saw the 50,000. I'm sorry. And then it's like you look under the hood. It's not a V8 engine. It's a V4. so on and so forth, right? He tells you these things and it's like, okay, nothing that you said is really adding up. Like, everything you told me about this car is a lie. I'm not buying the car from you. I'm not trusting you. I don't want your business. I don't want anything to do with you. Like, you're obviously a lying piece of shit, totally not trustworthy. I ain't buying anything you're selling. And the media has been selling this narrative about Trump for the last several years now, right? And it turns out most of the stuff that they've said has been based on lies, outright fabrications by the Democratic Party establishment, the Hillary Clinton campaign. So it's like, to me at this point, I look at President Trump, I try to with like a fresh pair of eyes, you know? Like, I look at him and I'm like, okay, I got this wrong. I got this so wrong in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. You know, it was 2020 that I finally was like, what the fuck? Like, wait a minute, you're telling me this wasn't true and this isn't true, and you guys are telling me that this is true, even though I can go to this other media source and see video, you know, and facts that clearly establish that what you're telling me is wrong, and you guys aren't even addressing like these flaws in your coverage. You know, we're just supposed to pretend like it doesn't exist, and if anybody disagrees with you, they're a bad person. You're going to use like moral character assassination, ad hominem attacks to get after anybody that disagrees with you. So that's the thing. Where I stand today, I say like I'm in the process of recovering from Trump Derangement Syndrome. At this point in my life, I honestly don't know what to think about Trump. You know, because there's a few things about him that I feel like could kind of cut either way. You know, the fact that he seems to have a good relationship with his kids, that seems to indicate he can't just be a total narcissist, a total monster, right? Like, he actually seems to have a good relationship with his kids, which, if you're a piece of shit tyrant, most of the time your kids hate you, you know? I mean, it's rare for you to have really good, solid relationships with people, right? So there's that. You know, there's the fact that now maybe some of his anger or some of the things that Trump has said about CNN, fake news, you know, Hillary Clinton, lock her up, you know, that kind of thing. What makes sense now? Like, if this has been your experience, you got a united conspiracy, basically, by the mainstream corporate media and the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Like, we are going to tar and feather Trump. We're going to assassinate his character, and we're going to do whatever it takes to do that. Any means necessary. Even if we got to make shit up. Even if we got to commit crimes to plant evidence to make it look like he's doing something. He's, you know, and if you're the subject of that, you know, then yeah, it makes sense that you would be angry and that your words, you know, when you talk about these people wouldn't be like all gracious and, you know, diplomatic and trying to see both sides. It's like, no, there's not two sides to this. There's a bunch of lying motherfuckers on the left, among the Hillary Clinton campaign, the Democratic National Committee, the mainstream corporate media, big tech, big pharma, the military-industrial complex. There's this whole, like, the intelligence services, this whole conglomeration of fuckheads, of lying sacks of shit that were coming after Trump unfairly for 4+ years. So I get it. Yeah, he's not going to be diplomatic and gracious towards them. He's going to be combative, as he should have been. The problem that I had at the time was like I was listening to or taking seriously the coverage of some of these mainstream media sources, and so it seemed like, well, Trump may just be this deranged person, this unstable person. But as it turns out, it's like, well, it's understandable. You know, if you get slandered like that, if you get falsely accused of things by people who are actually doing much worse shit than they even accuse you of doing, you know, yeah, you'd be mad. You'd be angry. You would talk about them the way that Trump talked about them. So at this point, I do hope that Trump doesn't run in 2024, mainly because I feel like there are better candidates on the right who would do all the good that Trump would want to do, but without some of the negative baggage that may come with it. No, that's just me. At this point, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I would prefer Ron DeSantis, for example, run in 2024. Partially because I think politically, pragmatically, he would have an easier time winning and, being an effective leader. But at the same time, if Trump runs again in 2024, based on how I now see the situation, I would 100% vote for him. I would 100% vote for Donald J. Trump to be the president again. Because, man, I've been lied to enough. I've realized now that I was being lied to. And it ain't cool. It ain't cool. It's like if you are a salesman at a used car dealership and you work for Chevrolet or whatever, right? And you're lying to me about, these Chevrolet cars that you're trying to sell. And I'm just using this as an example. I don't think there's anything wrong with Chevrolet. So please, General Motors, don't sue me. But if you're a used car salesman at Chevrolet and you're like lying, bold-faced lies to your customers, you shouldn't be surprised when a lot of them are like, hey, wait a minute, forget GM and Chevrolet. I'm going to go over to the Toyota dealership or the Honda dealership or whatever. I'm just using that as an example, but it's like, that's how I feel with these guys. It's like, I can't trust anything a Democratic politician tells me unless they personally have shown that they are trustworthy, So Tulsi Gabbard, I would trust her. I think she's says what she means and means what she says. Bernie Sanders, I would trust Bernie Sanders, at this point. I may not agree with him, but I think he believes what he says. I don't think he just says it. I think he actually believes what he says, means what he says what he means, that kind of thing. But all these other fucking people, anybody connected to the Biden administration at all, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, all these folks, lying sacks of shit. Fuck all of them. And fuck CNN, fuck MSNBC, fuck the New York Times, fuck the Washington Post, fuck the Atlantic, fuck them, And so I'm like, I would vote for President Trump. So my message to the mainstream media is, guess what, guys? Your plan backfired. And I think it's backfiring a lot. I think there's a lot of people out there who feel like I do. Like, man, you guys fucking lied to me, Like, fool me once, shame on me. But you're not going to fool me twice. Because now I know what you're up to. Now I know your game. Now I know that you'll just make shit up. Now I know that you'll go commit crimes so that you can plant a false flag on the other side and then cover it as if it's a legitimate story and then never bother to issue a correction or retraction when it comes to light that it was actually your guys who did it. So anyway, that's the moral of the story. Hey, if you think I'm wrong or if there's stuff about Trump that I need to know that I'm not considering, then let me know. Comment send me an email at www.apodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's whiskey alpha podcast@gmail.com. And I think the www are capitalized and the word podcast is lowercase. I don't know if that matters, but send me an email. I'll put the email in the show notes. www.apodcast@gmail.com. Send me, your thoughts or comment if you're on social media or whatever, right? But thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Remember my book about the cancel culture, super woke superheroes, the satire of those schmucks, called Super #SJW Man, a cancel culture superhero satire. It is on sale this week only through Saturday, February 19th on Amazon. There'll be a link in the show notes. It'll be an affiliate link. So if you buy that book or if you buy anything else, Amazon will kick a small portion of your sales price back to me at no cost to you. Plus, if you get that book, hey, if you can't beat them, might as well laugh at them. Laugh at their fucking absurdity. The super woke left. Anyway, so my name is Daniel D. Hope you enjoyed this. This is the What's Wrong with America podcast for Sunday, February 13th, 2022. Be back with another great episode next week. Till next time, peace out.